Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming to this session. I know 3D is kind of a hot topic at the moment, and I hope that what I'm presenting here will give you some ideas of how you can publish 3D objects and get them onto first your own website, but also into Europeana. I'm going to try to be as general as I can here so that everybody can take something away from the talk. But bear in mind that I will be demonstrating a particular piece of software that we've developed and talking about how you would integrate that software into your own website. So it might get quite technical at some points, and I really apologize in advance for anyone here who just has a more general interest and isn't a member of like the technical staff at your institute. But I do feel that there's something in the presentation for everyone. So please don't necessarily quit the Zoom room straight away. Feel free to stay around. Okay, so my name is Kathryn Cassidy, and I work for an organisation called the Digital Repository of Ireland, who are the national aggregator in Ireland, working with cultural heritage institutes, but also with researchers in the humanities and digital humanities and the social sciences domains. And the work that I'm talking about today is mostly actually the work of my colleague Mashal Ahmad, who's pictured there on the top left, along with the rest of our team. And she's the one who developed the 3D viewer, and she also did a lot of work with our content providers on converting these really huge 3D terrestrial laser scan files that our content providers were giving us for long-term preservation into formats that were more suitable for web publishing, so that we could also offer access to the 3D models as well as the preservation aspect. And this work was done as part of the Europeana Common Culture project initially, and that project ran from January 2019 until December 2020. And the project had a strong focus on improving the quality of data and metadata in Europeana. When it came to 3D data, we kind of undertook a review of what was out there in Europeana, and we found that there was a huge variation in the quality of what was available in Europeana. For example, there were objects that were tagged as 3D that weren't really 3D objects. They were photographs of three-dimensional real-world objects, such as like photos of a sculpture or something like that. There were a lot of things that were 3D objects, but they were using an old Flash-based viewer that basically isn't reliable anymore. It won't work reliably in modern browsers. So there were a lot of issues around the quality of the 3D data that was already there. And there was another initiative happening around the same time, and that was the 3D Content in Europeana task force. So we joined this task force and worked with them. And the focus of the task force was on developing recommendations. So they were trying to provide some sort of guidelines for cultural heritage institutes and aggregators on the best way to share content to Europeana, 3D content. So we worked with the task force and we were able to feed in information from our investigation that we'd done on the current state of 3D content in Europeana, and we were able to contribute to and help to form some of these best practice guidelines that came out of that task force. So the final report of the task force, it made a number of recommendations, and I'm not kind of going into them all here, but it's the link is available there if you do want to read this in more detail. But some of the things that we thought were like interesting for us, I've just highlighted there. So they found that Sketchfab was really the main viewer that currently works well with Europeana, and they recommended that the community work with other viewer developers to make sure that they're adding support for embedding in Europeana and make sure that works smoothly. They recommend using OEmbed, the OEmbed format, and that's kind of it's a protocol or format for allowing embeddable content to be included in other websites. And Europeana supports OEmbed viewers and OEmbed players, so they're recommending that OEmbed be used if possible. And they identified a lot of fairly popular file formats, which we felt if we were going to have a viewer application, it should probably support as many of those as possible. Okay, so I'm actually going to go on, sorry, before I go here, I'm going to go on to an example of like what is maybe a good 3D 3D resource in Europeana. So if we have a look here, this handsome fellow is a 3D model of a Janus figure found in Bow Island, County Fermanagh. And this model comes from the Discovery programme. You'll see that in the metadata here. And it was aggregated by the 3D Icons project. You'll see, you've got your preview of the object, and that's where you'd normally see the image if you had an image resource. When we click there, it'll load up this model, or this viewer, and we're able to directly interact with the object here within Europeana. So we can zoom in and out, we can rotate him and get a good look at his big scary head. So lots of nice interaction that you can do there, which you're able to do it directly within the Europeana platform. And I think this is a really good use of 3D. So you're not directing the user out to download a file and open it up with some other software. You're not making them click a link to go out to another platform to view it. They can interact with it directly there within Europeana. And I think most of us would probably agree that that's what we'd like 3D content in Europeana to look like. So we want this embeddable viewer that appears right there and allows you to stay on the Europeana platform and play with the object like this. Okay, so this object is using the Sketchfab viewer. So the model in this case is hosted on Sketchfab. It's a very nice little platform. If I click here, it'll take me out to Sketchfab and show me the model within Sketchfab. Sketchfab is nice because it lets you upload your images and it'll store them for you. So that can work really well for an organization who doesn't have a lot of storage space. It has a very nice little viewer that has lots of cute features. You see these little icons here down the bottom left. Well, those are some of the different features that you can do with the viewer. So it's quite nice. It's embeddable. It works very well with. We've seen that it works with Europeana. But Sketchfab might not be suitable for all use cases. So why would I say that? Firstly, Sketchfab, it is a commercial platform. It's relatively inexpensive to use. It's not super pricey, but for some organizations that can still be hard to justify this, it's a recurring yearly fee, so it's not always easy to justify that. Also from our perspective, we were a bit concerned about the longevity of the platform. So as a commercial platform, it'll probably keep providing this service while it's profitable to do so. But, companies do fold or they retire particular platforms. That happens all the time. And there have been examples where platforms disappeared basically with very minimal notice, so that if you hadn't exported all your data or downloaded your data from the platform, you ran the risk of actually losing access to your own data. So because we're providing long-term preservation services as well as access to the content, we're always very aware of these risks. So we decided that for us, we'd rather have something that was self-hosted. We'd rather build our own 3D viewer or use something that was open source that we could host locally. And this is likely to be a better solution for some larger organizations who have the capacity to self-host the data, or for people who have that concern about using a commercial platform. So when we were doing this, we tried to build it bearing in mind the recommendations that came from the 3D Content in Europeana task force. So we built our own viewer and we've published it as open source software. So it's available for you to reuse. And I'm going to go on and just show you the viewer, and you can have a think about it and see if it looks like it's a better option for you, or it might be a useful option for you. So this is an object in the DRI, which is a face shield model. And the model was actually created by my colleague Michelle, and you can see that you can do all of the usual things. You can zoom in, you can rotate and so on, and interact with it right there within our DRI platform. This model is in the form of a .stl file, which is a format that's very commonly used for 3D printing. And we did actually print that model, and you can see here we've uploaded some additional files with this, and this is the printed, this is a photograph of the printed model. Here's one with the kind of elastic band attached, and here's one with the plastic screen actually attached. And this is something that like I've actually been using during the pandemic, and a lot of 3D printing enthusiasts were printing masks kind of like this using a variety of different 3D models that people had published online. And these masks were then being delivered to hospitals all over Ireland and probably in your countries as well, to make up that shortfall in PPE, personal protective equipment availability at the start of the pandemic. So I thought that's really nice example there. But we also have some kind of more cultural heritage content. So if I go on and we look at a few more, these ones are, we have a series of bridges, and these are 3D models of bridges, and they're from Transport Infrastructure Ireland. They're scans of, they were carried out kind of when roads were being built. So TII would do a lot of archaeological surveys before any new roads were built, and they scan any artifacts or any pre-existing built environment artifacts and stuff before roadworks are carried out. So there's one, this is another one. That was a little bit messier. I think this one's a nice one. So you can see these are little models of, and a lot of them are bridges, but they have other things as well, including kind of monuments and things like that. So we're gonna maybe start getting a little bit more technical at this point, but don't get scared. So let me see. There should be. So here's an embeddable version of that viewer. So what we saw here is kind of the viewer in our application. So that's just a little window there, but what we want for, if we're going to embed it in Europeana, we need a kind of an embeddable version where we've stripped out all of our branding or the rest of our website. So it's just the little square with the object inside that. And we said we were going to make that OEmbed compatible. So to make something OEmbed compatible, you need to also provide this little additional endpoint on your website with a little bit of JSON. So if we just take a quick look at what that looks like, just click here. This is the JSON, this is the OEmbed JSON. And you'll see it has this URL here. This is that embeddable URL, this one here. But there's also like a little bit of additional information about the object there. And in theory, either of those links should work when they're sent in EDM. And this is something we're hoping to test very soon. And we'll be updating the viewer with whatever it is that the way that it works properly. And we'll update the documentation and so on as well. So the EDM itself, if we take a look at what the EDM looks like, it'll be something like this. Where am I? I'll need to go to the collection level. And if I look at the EDM feed, so if we come here, we'll see this is our EDM, and you'll see that in this case we have in the is shown by, we have the link to the OEmbed snippet, and that OEmbed snippet contains the link then to the embeddable viewer. But also you could potentially just put the embeddable viewer URL in there. Okay, so if you want to use this viewer and to integrate it into your own website or platform, how would you go about doing that? Well, we've tried to provide several different options. So first of all of the code for our platform, it is available open source. And I've got links to the various different bits and pieces here at the end of my slides, which will be available. So you could go and look at our code and play around, but we've kind of made two standalone versions of the viewer, which should be a bit easier to integrate into your own website. And the first one is, it's a small Ruby on Rails application, because our own platform is a Ruby on Rails platform. So if I go here, it's not this one, it's, oops. So this is some fairly technical stuff. Don't worry too much if you don't understand what's going on, but it won't take up too much time. Right, so this is a Ruby on Rails server application. So if I start the server, it'll go, and it's going to come up on localhost 3000. Whoops. We'll just make a new thing here. There we go. So when we go here, we'll see it's not terribly pretty, but it kind of works. So you can upload a new model, or we can just view one that's there already. So if I click on show, this is kind of the embeddable version. That's one of those bridge models that we saw earlier. We've also got the code to create that little embed JSON. So if you, in particular, if you have a Ruby on Rails application, this would be probably an easy way for you to grab the code. It has the controllers and the views and things that you would need to display the 3D models. But if you don't use Ruby on Rails, we also created just a really simple HTML and JavaScript version, which is kind of easier. So if I just kill that Ruby version, and I'm going to go back. So this version is just a really, really simple version. If we look at what's there, you've got a JavaScript file here. You've got a HTML file, and then there's some libraries, some JavaScript libraries in the lib there, and the data directory just is where I keep my data. Don't worry about that. Okay, so if we start this one, to run this, you would basically, you just take all those files and you copy them into your own web server. In my case, just for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to run a tiny web server right here in this directory. So this directory will be the root directory for the web server. So if I just do, you're seeing all my terrible typing. Okay, so now this is running on localhost 8081. Let's just copy that. Now, if I go to that URL, nothing happens, but that's okay, because what I actually need to do is I need to give it a file, a URL to a file, to a 3D model. So if I pass in a parameter here, and I say file equals, and I've got files in my data directory, so if I just go back here and look at what we've got, okay, we'll try this one. This is the same bridge model. Take a look at it. So if I pass it in like that, oh no, I'll need to pass it now. I can put it in as localhost. So it can be a full, 8081 data/bridge.stl. So it can be a relative path, or it can be a full URL. So if we just hit enter there, it can't be a full URL. You're kidding me. Have I put that wrong? Maybe it's not working on localhost. Sorry. And I'm recording it instead of a live demo, so it should be perfect. There we go. Okay. So here we go. We can see that the bridge model has loaded in and it's displaying it. So you could, if you copied these files into your web server, you could essentially, by passing in any model which you've stored anywhere else as a file parameter, you could be displaying 3D content on your own website. And maybe then you could pass that URL through to put that into your EDM, and that gets passed through to Europeana. So just look and show it supports a couple of other formats. So there's the GLTF format. If I just give it that URL instead, somewhere in there should be a duck. Yes, there we go, this tiny little ducky. And it supports GLB format files, and we're adding more support for different file formats all the time, so it is going to continue to be developed, and we're hoping that it'll be able to support like a lot of the really the most common formats that that people are using, especially in the cultural heritage domains. We do the library, the JavaScript library that we're using to underlie this. It supports kind of 40 models or 40 different file formats or something like that. So it should be possible for us to support all of the common file formats. So if I go back then to my slides and just show you these resources, these are the links to all of those, the different versions of the viewer that I've shown. And then there's a DRI project, 3D project website there at the bottom that just gives a bit more information about the whole process of us developing that 3D viewer. So thank you very much for listening. I hope it didn't get too technical, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to chat more. Thanks.